Hello everyone, it's your favorite down in space here, and today we're going to be talking about the new Hulu show, All Is Fair. Now, sadly, I wanted to get this video out a few days ago, but then every other YouTuber on the planet decided to jump on it, so sadly I'm just copying a trend. Oh well, I guess that's what I get for being a slowpoke. Anyway, yeah, we're going to be talking about this show. There's going to be a lot of bad we're going to be talking about, but I'm going to try to be fair to it, not just be enjoying in the bash pile. I want to try to actually talk about the show, not just give a complete hate on it, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's begin. Now, I'm going to be honest, I want to start this video off with the good. So for that, I'm going to be talking about the best parts of the show before I actually give a plot synopsis or talk about the bad stuff, because the plot synopsis basically describes a lot of the bad stuff. And sadly, we'll be recontextualizing some of the good parts, but oh well, we have to roll with the punches. One thing I gotta say, the acting is good. I can't think of a single actor on the TV show that I've seen, the 5 episodes I've seen so far, that have any real complaints on my part, and some of them, especially like the 2 older ones, are absolutely perfect at the job. And obviously not all of them are god tier, but like they good acting all around. No complaints on the acting end. The plot line, speaking of the older couple, is actually very good and very touching. I think is handled with a lot of true, honest-to-God sadness of how they handled that quite well. I would not be shocked if the writers had at least some experience with that kind of topic. And the plotline of Kim Kardashian's character, who I cannot remember the name of to save my life. In fact, I don't remember any of the names. Sorry. Is okay. Most of it's bad, but we'll get into that. But I love the arc of her trying to find a way to be able to have her kids with her frozen embryos and such, and her trying to struggle against the fact that her soon-to-be ex-husband is like doing all this bad stuff. That was well done in my opinion, if you ask me. I think that was handled pretty interestingly, and the show occasionally has some interesting points of how someone who works in the kind of lawyering job they do would have a lot of difficulties with, trying to take on, agreeing to a marriage, seeing how often they can end up badly. I think all of that was reasonably well done, and the set design costumes are okay. The costumes are kind of weird, I'm not gonna lie. Like, why do they change so much? And some of them are just, why are you wearing? Aren't you professional? There's one costume that I swear, okay, I'm sorry, crossing into bad territory, not gonna be talking about that. So overall, some part of the show are actually pretty well done, honestly, that I don't have much bad to say about. And it's pretty good at explaining things quickly. So I gotta give that props to the show, if that makes sense. So I think I've covered almost the good stuff that I can say, at least without any bad context setup. So let's actually get into the plot synopsis. Okay, if it sounds like I'm being a bit vague at some points, especially early on, that's because it's been quite a while since I've seen the first few episodes, and I don't want to risk getting a few details wrong. So I'm going to stick to the broad scopes that I can't mess up, basically. The show follows a all-female lawyer team who, how they start out is that there's these 2 lawyers, or some, I'm not sure if they tag all count as lawyers, but I'm not going to stress over the terms here. Basically, that work at this company that's super patriarchal and male-dominated and everything, and they're not being treated right or something like that. And so the boss, who is a woman, which essentially meant that she was voted by the board into her position, does somewhat call into question how patriarchal the entire company is if they're putting the female as their leader, but I'm going to digress that. And so she realized that they're going to be stifled by this company because they would never accept women being successful in this company. Don't know how she got here then. And so she gives them like $1 million or something like that to go start her own company. They can take one other like of their like members of the staff with them, and so they take the lady played by that chick that was in that Rookie spinoff. Does anyone know if that show's going on, by the way? Anyway, so the 3 of them are going off to start their own company, but the kind of protege of the older boss woman is pissed because she wasn't given this opportunity, and so she vows revenge, and she's like stereotypically evil, kind of like over the top stereotypically evil. You'll see more, but even that gets thrown under, we'll get into that later. And then it hard cuts to 10 years later. Like, I mean hard cuts. Like, it's like they're doing all this, and then hard cuts to Kim Kardashian's character coming home. And in the time period, they have become one of, if not one of the most successful law firms in the country. 10 years, overnight, one of the most successful law firms in the country. And they later on will say that they've never lost a single case in 10 years. I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe that. That does not make sense. I refuse to believe that. But anyway, they also, during this time, they only take on female clients. They've only seemed to be dealing with divorce-related stuff, but I don't think that's strictly necessary. But they will say they only take on only female clients, which I think is legal, but it's definitely a little sketchy and but whatever, right? Choose to take your own clients, that's fine. What is definitely not okay is the fact they will say they only will let women work in the company. So all women only. That is on some extremely thin legal ice. It might be possible, maybe, but it's not looking good. And from a moral perspective, like talking like morally for a second here, what's the logic exactly? So so obviously a company being patriarchal against women in their own ranks or even in general is bad. But the company you came from is objectively less sexist to women than their company is to men. Because, they would let women into the company. Their boss that they voted in, the CEOs voted in, was a woman. Some of the most successful lawyers there were women. So, yes, there might have been definitely some sexism going on. They make some very stereotypical jokes. But you just straight up want to let men in. Even if that's okay legally, morally, it seems very, odd. What's the logic here? It's literally just, it's okay when we do it, I guess. And, I've heard some people say that, it's a super feminist show. I don't quite think that's the case, but I do see where that comes from. I really do. And, honestly, kind of Mary Sue-ish, but not quite. We'll get into that. And so, like I said, we've talked about 10 years in the future. A lot of them have, other parts of kind of moving on in the life story that is just kind of there. The next major thing, and we'll actually skip to that for a second. I want to talk about the cases in the show for a second. Now, you may have the impression that this show, where all the characters are lawyers, would be about, on some level, lawyering in the cases involved, right? It's like, oh, if everyone on the TV show is about cops, you expect it to be about cop stuff. Everyone in the show is about a guy that works in a medical building, you expect it to be about medical stuff. And, yeah, every episode they have a case or two, but I assure you, it does not come up that much, at all. I'm not sure the exact proportions. I haven't, counted every minute of every episode. But I'm willing to bet, outside the first episode, that the cases the characters deal with in every episode takes up maybe 30% of the episode at most. Probably less. And I don't mean in the sense of, when they're working on the case, they have a personal conversation, so it doesn't count. I mean, the episodes rarely really focus on the actual case, which really does put into some question about the status of that show. But it's not strictly bad, as my sister pointed out, that, it could be just using it as a backdrop. But then the show wants you to believe the cases really matter to the plot of the episode, when they just really don't. They feel very disconnected. And as cases, they are super easy for the most part. One or two had, some questionable things the characters had to deal with, but most of them are, super simple for them and just breeze through without much issue, or, they can just get around any problem without issue, which does not help the Mary Sue claims, but also just makes the cases boring. They're short, and nothing really happens. It's most, with two exceptions out of the 5 episodes, all the other ones are just, the man is objectively bad, the woman is objectively a victim, and it's super easy to get the case out. So, if the premise isn't about trying to deal with complicated relationships or about trying to save the very innocent women from horrible situations, then it makes the cases feel superfluous. And you're focused on them enough to be interesting, so it feels highly superfluous to be in the show. But the show wants you to think they matter, but they don't. They really don't. There is, ironically, one exception in episode 3, I think it is, where there seems to be some, at least in my opinion, some ambiguity of whether the woman who offed herself in the start of the episode was actually guilty for some of it, but the show doesn't really care to explore that. And then in episode 5, I think it was, they had some interesting questions about, divorcing a person who's sick, but they don't go into that enough to be interesting. So, once again, a bit of a wasted opportunity. So I've rambled about the plot/main setup of the show, but now we're going to get into the next big problem, and possibly the worst problem this show has, the hypocrisy and the tonal whiplash. So I'm going to start with the tonal whiplash to explain what I'm getting at. So, the show does not know how to pace scenes very well together, and creates some serious amounts of cognitive dissonance going on here. So, the show will be trying to be super serious and mature one second, and then will just veer off completely into like silly antics or something like that, with no progression between the two. And this isn't like one scene or a thing in one episode. It's happened in all 5 episodes multiple times. This is just an actual flaw of the writing department. Like, I think the worst and most egregious example has to be in, I think it was episode 2, where the older woman is talking about how hard it is for her and her husband with her husband's horrible degenerative disease, which is one of the more better plot lines in the show. And then the characters, to halfway comfort her, try to make her feel better and get her mind off it, start talking about how they're going to spend millions of dollars on an auction that just shows up in the episode. And, like, the scene just hard cuts from, like, this deep, emotional, serious conversation to chit-chatting about what random artifacts they're going to get that basically never come up ever again. You know, I'm not one of those scumbags who wants to say that rich people can't have problems or whatever. That's not what I'm trying to get at here. What I'm trying to get at here is that usually you don't want to focus on that necessarily, unless it's like the theme is like all the money and wealth can't fix some issues. But it's like, you know how Batman, when he's grieving his parents, he doesn't do it like he does it like in a graveyard or alone or in an emotionally vulnerable moment, and not like in the middle of a party he's actively enjoying, where he's like, man, my parents are dead, I hate that, woo! You know why he doesn't do that? Because it would undercut the serious emotionalness of the situation and make him look kind of vapid. You know what happens when they do it in All Is Fair? It makes them look kind of vapid. And that's another thing, is the show really, really loves to show off how successful the main women are. Like, extremely so, to the point it's like every episode will have at least a dedicated point of like showing off how fabulously wealthy and well off they are, which does kind of undercut how the main theme of the show is supposed to be about how far they're struggling, which, once again, shows you can do that, showing how well off a character could be and their struggles, but the writers don't do that very well. So it comes off almost like Mary Sue-ish of how perfectly successful they are and how they never almost fail at anything. And then, like, a problem will kind of show up, but doesn't really feel like it impacts that reputation, if that makes sense. I don't know how to explain that necessarily. And that gets into probably the most bizarre plot point in the entire show, in my opinion, or at least part of it is. So, Kim Kardashian's character has a husband who breaks up with her in episode 1 or starts a divorce proceeding. And the reason he gives, and there are also a few minor others, but the main reason he gives, at least in the scene, and that continues to get referenced throughout the other episodes, is that he was jealous of how perfect Kim Kardashian's character is. How she is amazing, how everything in life goes successful, she is so great, and everything's so rich, and it makes him feel inferior by comparison. Now, I'm sure a lot of people would immediately call that Mary Sue and bad writing, and it's not strictly so. You can totally do that, how people can just be so envious and jealous that they do evil, stupid things because they're jealous and envious of people. That can totally happen. That's definitely true. Look online for 5 minutes and you'll see that. But it does need to be handled in a particular way in this context, otherwise it just comes off as the main character being so special and so cool no one else can accept it. And that's kind of what happens in the show. It's not too bad necessarily, but it does happen, especially in episode 1 and 2. But what really tips over the edge to just being weird is that the show actively points out that his reasoning is stupid and he's a bad person for doing it, because you are. If you actively break up and do bad things to your partner because they are more successful and well off than you, or more successful in their endeavors, then you are a scumbag. But one of the people he's cheating on a lot of people, okay? With a lot of people at her, is the employee they have at the company. One of the employees they have that isn't a lawyer but works for them specifically. And when Kim Kardashian go to confront her about it, this massive betrayal because they were friends, the main reason she gives is also that she was jealous and envious of Kim Kardashian, which still could totally work. In fact, having them both be in it could be an interesting way to show off how people could be so envious and jealous. Or even how maybe Kim Kardashian's character was a bit too egotistically driven and that pushed people away. Not that I think that would be in the case, but I'm saying like a hypothetical. But the show does neither of those, but also can constantly tries to say, both in the writing and Kim Kardashian's character say she was justified for doing that, or she was understandable. What? Like, we literally just went out of our way to point out how objectively bad the husband was, but when the best friend betrayed her for the same reasons, it's sympathetic, and she's like, what? There's some other stuff going on here that kind of somewhat, I don't want to say justify, but plays into the main theme there. But that is just such a weird thing to me, where it's one character is rightfully vilified for doing something for a bad thing for bad reasons, but then the other character does bad things for bad reason and just gets made out to be this sympathetic little puppy dog. There's no cognitive, nothing at all. We're not even going to acknowledge the fact that those are the same reasons. Do the writers even remember it's the same reason? And then I want to circle back around for my last major thing to talk about that villain. Oh yes, remember that cartoon villain type I was mentioning very early on here? Yeah, she does come back, actually in episode 1. She also split from the first company and started her own mostly successful corporation, but not as well. And she's been a petty little guy to them, constantly undermining them, and she's working with the soon-to-be ex-husband to try to undermine the main characters. Classic villain shenanigans, right? She's an objectively petty person who's just evil to the core because she's jealous and evil. Works totally fine, actually. And then episode 5 comes around where they try to make her extremely sympathetic and go into how hard her life has been, how things have been difficult and all that jazz, right? And I don't know what the writers were going for with that. I mean, that was episode 5, so maybe future episodes will explain it a little bit. But it feels extremely weird to me to spend the first 4 episodes setting up a character as basically a cartoon cutout of a bad person, and then episode 5 try to make her then a sympathetic puppy dog. When it's it's not that you can't have a villain with sympathetic motivation. Obviously not. Sympathetic villains can be great. But her episode 5 betrayal is so completely different than the first 4 episodes that it just feels like the writers just forgot what character they were writing for a second. And so, is she going to continue being the sympathetic puppy dog in future episodes? Then why the first 4 episodes started out as being against a bitch? If she's going to revert right back to the bitch personality, then why do we have this episode trying to make her sympathetic? And I must say to you, the episode 5 is over about 50% or over 50%, her arc in the show, the villain's what was supposed to be at least the villain's arc. And it just goes more into this tonal whiplash where the writers will ping pong between random things, almost random things and tones. And what's sad is that some of it's good, some of it is really good, but then most of it's just, some of it's nonsensical, others just poorly written. And it's such a mixed bag of a show. And it gets into even the good parts of the show, which is bad. It's not just a mixed bag, it's the bad parts that actually bring down the good parts. So it's do I think All Is Fair is bad? Yeah. It's a bad show, in my opinion. But it's not bad because the show itself is bad, if that makes sense. It's bad because the bad 80% of the show drags down the good 20%. If that makes sense. If we could isolate the 20 good percent, it'd be a good show. Maybe not a great show, but a good show. But the bad 8% drags it down. So, yeah, I'm not sure what to say about the show. Maybe we'll get better as it goes on. I don't know. But I wanted to give my opinions on it. I know at least 2 or 3 other YouTubers already given their opinions on it. I'm sure everyone's given all their opinions on it, especially if it's a lot of people hate, but they want to hate on the Kardashians. But I wanted to give my honest opinions on the show and what I felt about it, because I feel like a lot of people were going to just blindly either bash or praise it without really driving into it, if that makes sense. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like what I said or just want to talk to me about something, comment down below and subscribe and like on this video. If you don't like this, then dislike and tell me why I suck in the comments. Either way, I will see you all next time.